Hi, I'm Josh, and in this episode, we're going to illustrate the late singer and entertainer Meatloaf. Should be a photo right there. Until recently, for this kind of illustration, I would typically use a non-repro blue pencil like this one to do my sketches onto cardstock, illustration board, or even regular old inkjet paper. When I was happy with the sketch, I use a variety of tech pens, brush pens, all which have varying sizes and detail. And then I would scan that sketch into the computer, use Photoshop to color it. Sometimes I'd even break out traditional medium like some acrylic paints. But we're not going to do any of that this time, because for Christmas, my awesome wife got me a new iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil. So this time we're going to be all digital. Now some of you may be thinking, Meatloaf, the food? No, the singer. No. Not like that either. So for this project, I chose to illustrate the late great singer Meatloaf. It's really just a reason to break out the iPad, to open up Procreate and use the Apple Pencil, and to get used to how things work. When I heard of Meatloaf's passing, it did bring back memories of when I was a kid. My dad would play his albums. He had all kinds of vinyl he would play in the living room. Along with Meatloaf, he'd play AC/DC and Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Journey, Styx, all the fun, great bands from the 70s and 80s. But I remember Meatloaf's album being pretty regular in the rotation. And this is a kid-friendly YouTube channel, so his album, Bad Out of Heck, you guys can figure out what it was really called. But that one was in constant rotation in my family household growing up. So I thought, here's a fun project with no kind of timeline, deadlines, specs attached to it from a job or a prospective client. It's just kind of something to have fun with, to have something that's inspired by sounds from my youth. And, like I said, a good reason to get used to the Procreate program. Speaking of the Procreate program, they're not a sponsor, but I do enjoy using it. It seems like a popular one. I found it very similar to set up in Photoshop that I'm used to. So a lot of the same kind of tools, a lot of the same kind of setups with layers and the effects on layers, even a lot of the same terminology. So there's a minimal kind of transition for me, and the learning curve was reduced a little bit because of the familiarity with Photoshop. My general process for this was just kind of throw some tone in the background so I'm not staring at a white space, and then start playing with the shape. I wanted to create a shape that evoked some kind of emotion, that showed motion and emotion, and something to illustrate this big dude just bellowing with all of his lungs and gusto. Is that a thing that singers do? Anyway, I was trying to capture some fun shape with the body and using the line of motion that a lot of artists will use when creating a figure in motion or creating an illustration of a figure in motion. There you go. So once I get the general shape, I scribble a whole lot when I draw, so I always keep my scribbles on kind of separate layers, and even when I draw in traditional sense, I use the non-repro blue pencil like I showed at the beginning of the video. And that's just kind of getting my shapes down, my general feel of where everything's going to go. Then I'll go back and use, again, in traditional illustration, I'll use a mechanical pencil with a little darker blue lead. And then refine the lines. So to translate that technique into what I'm doing here in Procreate, I sketch out all the lines in a lighter color. I leave that on a layer, and then I'm going back and throwing some shapes and shades on top of it on another layer, and then I'm refining and defining the lines and shape of Meatloaf's pose figure here. So while I'm illustrating this, Obviously, I want this to be a fun illustration. I'm not necessarily trying to gain 100% likeness to Meatloaf. I wanted to capture his essence, kind of a caricature or a cartoon of him. I'm giving him bat wings. I don't think he really had bat wings in real life. Maybe he did, we just never saw it. I don't know. And then I like to keep a lot of the edges loose, because I think that if your outside edges are a little loose and then you kind of define like the center around his face, add more detail into the face and the hand, the center of focus, that helps the eye focus, but also keeps a little bit of that energy and that looseness. The kinetic feel of the illustration is still there. And to add to that kinetic, chaotic kind of feel, I like to throw in a lot of these paint splatters in the background, kind of just random bits. Maybe it's his vocal soul emitting. I don't know what it is, but I think it looks cool. And like I said, kind of adds to the energy and the flow of the illustration. So for the color, I used the red in the background, again, harkening back to that old album cover of a dude on a bat-like motorcycle flying out of a fiery place. So red for the background, and then cooler tones, bluish and purples for his figure. Obviously skin tone for his skin, but it's tinted a little bit by blue, and I add a little bit of the orange and pinks into the nose and the eyelids, just to kind of bring him some life there. I like to use the contrasting blue and red colors a lot in illustration. If you use the two colors well, you can give more dimension to your illustration. Red and blue kind of push each other away from one another. So it's kind of the theory of the old school 3D glasses that had the red lens and the blue lens on the other side. The blue tends to recede when you look at it, and the red tends to pull forward when you look at it. And there's kind of a vibration when the two colors are together. So that's kind of what I was going for with this. So in Procreate, I'm using a lot of the pencil tool initially to sketch. And then I'm switching back to the painter softer edge and dropping the opacity a little bit so that I gain some transparency while I'm going over, almost giving it washes if it were a traditional medium. And then of course I've got to get my signature in there, and that's very important. Got to get the tone right so it's visible but doesn't stand out and call too much attention to itself. Oh, one more great thing about Procreate, this video, all of this time-lapse animation of the illustration was completely like a default setting in Procreate. Didn't even know it was that way until after I'd done the illustration and I posted it onto Facebook. Someone else had told me, oh yeah, check out the time-lapse video that Procreate just makes for your illustration automatically. You didn't even have to set it up. Actually, you have to turn it off if you don't want to take up too much space and you continue to do other illustration after illustration on Procreate. You'll eat up all the space on your iPad or whatever you're using. But a great feature. Had a lot of fun doing this one. It was not for a project or for a client. No freelance budget attached to it, so it can just be whatever I wanted it to be. And when I felt like I was finished with it, I was finished with it. Nobody had any revisions for me, and I was pretty pleased with the end result. You know, of course, not perfect, and maybe I'll go back and spend some more time on it another time. Probably not, but I think this served the purpose of me trying to learn Procreate and trying to do something fun and relaxing. Sometimes as art projects, if they're done as a job, not always relaxing. I know that's surprising to hear from people that maybe don't do this every day, but it's a job. So sometimes you need stuff that's fun and just for you. This is just one approach. Of course, there are a million ways to execute this kind of illustration. Not everything came out exactly as planned. Sometimes that's frustrating. Sometimes it's pleasantly surprising. The important thing is to keep on trying, because remember, practice makes progress, not perfect. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or tips, please leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to get notified when new episodes are available. And if you're in the position to help this channel grow, please consider contributing to my Patreon. Other links to my website, Instagram, and tools used in this video are in the video description.